Good morning, everybody. Our chair will be a little late, so I'm going to start the meeting per request from everybody sitting around this dais. Can we please take roll call, Matt? Yes, we can do that. Thank you.
Michelle Andrus.
Present.
Mildred Brown. Summer Harding. Havania Hayes-White.
Here.
Sarah Jocham.
Present.
Christina Mills. Gloria Perez-Stewart. Gina Plate. Kayla Rodriguez.
Here.
Kimberly Salmonson.
Here.
Mariano Sands. Barbara Schulman.
Here.
David Toston.
Present.
Steve Winlock. And Leanne Liebes. We have a quorum. All right, Pledge of Allegiance.
If we can all please rise for the pledge. Sarah's going to lead us. Yes.
Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. David, I believe you get sworn in, but we're going to have to wait till Gina's here. So just sit patiently and know that this is the big day of your life. Okay.
The assembly already swore him in.
Oh, he's been sworn in.
Yeah, so we're good.
Oh, never mind. Done. Okay, it's official. I didn't know because usually we do it in front. So, okay. We are going to adjust the agenda a little bit. Scott Kerby from State Special Schools cannot be here tomorrow, so he's going to give his report now. So, Scott, if you could please give us your report.
Good morning. Thank you, Barbara, for being flexible. And my report will be brief. I'm going to start off with California School for the Blind, and this is the reason I cannot be here tomorrow, because I'm currently serving as the acting superintendent at the California School for the Blind as the director, continue my search for a new superintendent. The previous superintendent at the California School for the Blind, her name was Dr. Sharon Sachs, and she retired November 30th. And starting way back in September, October, I started my nationwide search for her replacement. I conducted a first round of interviews in late November, middle November, and had just a couple candidates and did not select anyone at that time. Upon her retirement, November 30th, I started my hopefully brief tenure as acting superintendent on December 1st. As a result of me not selecting a superintendent from the first round of candidates, I have reposted the position, continued my nationwide search, and conducted a second round of interviews at in the middle of March, just before what we had spring break, and again interviewed a couple candidates. And at this time, here in the middle of April, I am reviewing the data, the information, the feedback at this time, considering at least one candidate to move forward at this time. And so hopefully in a week or two, I'll reach a decision and have an appointment of that superintendent at the beginning of the new fiscal year, July 1. To start July 1. As you may know, to look for a leader in blind and VI services, it's a challenge. It's a challenge out there. And this is consistent across many state special schools, regardless if it's for the deaf or for the blind, to find strong leaders to be successful in leading a school and being the state representative for blind and VI is a challenge. And but my goal, my role is to find the very best person for that position, and I'll be as patient as I need to so I can find the very best person for that. So therein lies I must leave and fulfill my responsibilities as acting superintendent and return there tomorrow. So that's a positive. One reason I have to be there tomorrow is because I'm here today, and the previous 2 days, Monday and Tuesday of this week, I was in Washington, D.C., and I was attending and supporting the 2 state special schools for the deaf, California School for the Deaf Riverside, California School for the Deaf Fremont. They both participated in the Deaf Academic Bowl at Gallaudet University this past weekend, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. That competition started with 4 regional competitions, north, south, east, west. And each regional competition started with 24 schools for the deaf, schools or programs for the deaf in each region. And in those regional competitions, they would take 5 from each region to compete at the national level at Gallaudet. To my pride, California School for the Deaf Riverside was the West Regional Champion out of 24 schools in the West, and represented the West into the national competition this past weekend. Much to my pride again, California School for the Deaf, out of 98 schools across the nation and programs, placed 3rd in the national competition. And the Indiana School for the Deaf placed 1st. And California School for the Deaf Riverside placed 3rd, which is quite an achievement and quite a tribute to the focus on academic achievement for all students that are deaf and hard of hearing that attend California School for the Deaf Riverside. California School for the Deaf Riverside, they're in their 2nd year of new leadership there with Dr. Leibach Amon, and really has turned the mission of the school around to focus on all students that are deaf and hard of hearing, regardless of their communication mode or access, and focusing on what's most important to make them successful in college and career readiness, and that is academic achievement. So that is quite exciting. Another reason I must go back to California School for the Blind tomorrow in Fremont is that Secretary of State Padilla will be visiting the California School for the Deaf Fremont tomorrow as part of a whirlwind trip around public schools in the Bay Area. And I will be accompanying Mr. Padilla tomorrow at the California School for the Deaf Fremont, and giving him a little education 101 on deaf and hard of hearing programs specific to state special schools tomorrow. So the excitement continues at the state special schools and the diagnostic centers. Academic achievement is up, enrollment is up, our outreach programs are thriving, and I'm excited to stand here on this program today and represent those 3 state special schools and 3 diagnostic centers. Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for letting us adjust the agenda a little bit. I appreciate it. It's great to start out with that kind of positive of what's going on. So it always starts the day off right. And Gina's here, so I'm turning it over to her. And we are at communication and announcements.
Oh, fantastic. I wish I could say I was in better shape, but you will hear in my voice that walking quickly has left me out of breath. So let me just thank Barbara for jumping in, carrying the leadership of the commission. I apologize for things sometimes outside of our control. I just appreciate the commission's flexibility. So thank you. Let's see, we're going to go ahead and did you already do a review of the agenda, Barbara?
No, we didn't do
Right, so let's go ahead and, so Christina, in our last meeting, agreed to be our elections chair, but she is unfortunately not with us today. So in your packet, we talked about it the last. Oh, okay. So Matt is going to be handing around some nominations forms. And just as a reminder, we are at the next meeting going to be electing a chair and vice chair. You have the opportunity at this meeting to do a self-nomination if you are interested in either the chair or vice chair position. At the last meeting, we talked briefly about the roles, the duties, and then we would do the election at the next meeting. I also shared that I thought I was going to be terming out at the end of this year. There was a glitch. My term actually ends at the end of 2019. So would be honored to stay on as one more year of chair if the group would support that. Just wanted to put that out there. If you are interested in nominating yourself for either the chair or vice chair position, please go ahead and fill this out.
Everyone fill it out regardless. There's an option for not interested. Just so I make sure I have everyone.
Perfect, thank you. And then give those to Matt. Give those to Matt at some point during the course of the meeting today or tomorrow. All right, any questions about that?
Correct. You would start the meetings in August. Our August meeting, you would be the chair or the vice chair. And it's only, as I understand it, self-nominated. Nobody can nominate you. So I can't say, oh, Vania, please do it. I can't do that. You have to nominate yourself.
Thanks for clarifying.
You don't have to, you can check I'm not interested on the box. If you are interested, please check chair or vice chair. Then it will go to Christina and the ballots will be ready in June. And you both are terming out in 2019? Yes, we are both terming out in 19. Yes, we're both terming out December of 2019. Yes, we both are. But that doesn't mean that you can't, if you would like to run, that doesn't mean you can't run.
Right. Great, thanks for clarifying, Barbara. All right. All right, moving on. Did you already do the flag salute?
We did.
And roll? Woohoo, you are all over it. All right. Oh, and Scott, thank you for your flexibility.
Can I say one thing?
Please do.
So if you are interested in running and you want to understand more about what the time commitment and what that entails, I'm happy to talk to anyone privately about just sort of the role and the expectations and all that, okay?
Great, thank you, Kristen. All right, Barbara, would you like to give us an overview of the agenda and what we are going to be engaged in?
Okay, Vice Chair, if you're running, this is what you do. This is one of your duties and responsibilities. Our item number 1 is update and small group discussion of the development of California's accountability system. At 11 o'clock, we're going to have the legislative update and small group discussions on the 2 bills, AB 2704 and AB 1951. Then we're going to have a discussion. Matt's going to lead us in a discussion about our talking points for our state visit this afternoon. And we haven't done it in a couple of years, and it's so exciting to go over there and hear from everybody there. It's just exciting. Then you're going to have lunch from 12:15 to 1:30. You know our agenda. And then we have to be at the Capitol for sure at 1:30, not 5 minutes late. And then we're going to hear from the State Assembly. Then we're going to go meet with the legislators. And then we're going to have a discussion from the Senate. So it's a really exciting, full afternoon. And we all will go to lunch, and then you just have to meet there. And I assume Matt's going to tell us where to meet. But he's going to do that at 11:40 when does his discussion.
Just one thing, on the agenda, it says meeting room to be determined for the meeting with Tanya Lieberman. That's going to be in room 125, which is on the assembly side. I was thinking we should meet in the rotunda in the restored side, as we call it, but the large rotunda. So it's hard to miss.
And for those watching on the webcast will be going on through the meeting this morning, and then as commissioners go across the street, there will not be a webcast this afternoon, but then they'll resume tomorrow, right, Matt?
Perfect. Thank you so much. Like Barbara said, this is an exciting day. I'll talk about it more when we get to the item, but let me just appreciate Matt and Kristen. This is putting together all agenda items is a big lift. Putting together a Ledge Day and coordinating Ledge visits for us individually was a Herculean lift. And so, Matt, I just want to say thank you for the work that you've put into this, helping us with the talking points that we will share with all of you later. Because again, this is not a Ledge Day that looks the way it might look when you're with a member organization or wearing a different hat. We will talk about our functions as an advisory body and what that means and how that translates to your conversations with legislators in the building today. So just want to say thank you for the work that you did. Okay, so then we are ready to jump in to item number 1. So Cindy and Jenny, thank you. I feel like each meeting I say thank you for your flexibility and timing, but thank you for your flexibility. Want to welcome you to the podium and group. This is an update and a small group discussion on the latest of our statewide accountability system. And again, just want to thank Cindy and Jenny for their work and their collaboration. Welcome.
Oh, okay. How many times do I have to press the button? 3, apparently. Thank you for having me here today. I'm going to provide you with a quick update of where we are on the modified measures that we're working on for the alternative schools. And I've been told that the PowerPoint isn't quite working yet. So do you want me to proceed just using the handout, or do you want me to wait till they fix?
Go ahead and proceed with the handout and I'll work on this.
Okay, so the topics that we're going to cover today, as I said, we're going to look at the modified methods that we're doing for the DAS schools. We'll just briefly review the 1-year grad rate, because I want to remind everyone not to forget that. And we're going to do an overview of the college and career indicator. It's been a while since we talked about this indicator, so I just wanted to remind everyone on how that was created and some of the things we kept in mind as we were creating it. Then we'll look at the modified career measures for the CCI, and we'll look at the new data that is planned for collection in CalPADS. So moving to slide 4, just to remind everyone, I'm sure you remember this, but beginning in 2018, all DAS schools will receive a dashboard. They are going to be receiving a dashboard, and they're going to be held accountable for the same measures as traditional schools. That's really important to understand. They're same measures, so the dashboard is going to look exactly the same. Going on to slide 5, the difference with the dashboards is that we may use modified methods on select state indicators, not on all state indicators, but on select state indicators. And this is a way that we can, that we thought was most appropriate so that we can more fairly evaluate the success and progress of alternative schools. So in collaboration with the John W. Gardner Center at Stanford University, our partner has been very great, we put together the Alternative Schools Task Force to help inform the decisions about the modified methods for DAS schools. And they've been working in 2 areas over the last year, and that is the 1-year grad rate and modified career measures. So moving on to slide 8, the 1-year grad rate. Really important for alternative schools because, as you know, in the dashboard, for traditional schools, they are non-DAS schools, they are getting a 4-year graduation rate. So we're looking at students who enter 9th grade, and 4 years later, do they graduate with a regular diploma? For alternative schools, we are looking at only students in grade 12 on whether they graduate or not. And they could get a regular diploma, they could get the high school equivalency certificate, such as a GED, special education certificate, and if an 11th grader graduates early, we'll include them in the counts also. We are going to be putting some reviews into place to make sure that enrollments in DAS schools do not increase substantially based on this new accountability model. We haven't exactly quite figured out all the ins and outs of that, but we do know that is something that we have to do. We did something similar in the old accountability model when we were using growth, determining if there was a change of 10% or more in enrollment from one year to the next. And we'll probably do something similar to that as we move forward, checking that on an annual basis. Okay, moving on to the CCI. So I thought it was really important to review the purpose of the CCI because it really was designed to measure how well students were prepared for college or career when they graduate from high school. That's the whole purpose of it. And we really wanted to develop the CCI so that it would encourage schools to provide all students with a very rigorous and broad course of study that would lead to likely success for post-secondary. And we felt it was really important to include multiple measures in this. We have a lot of different schools in California that they focus on a lot of different things, and we wanted to make sure that we captured all those things that we think are good things and give schools credit for doing that. I'm on slide 11. So our current model has two things, two types of measures in it. We have assessment measures. Those assessment measures are the Smarter Balance Summative Assessment, the Advanced Placement Exams, and the International Baccalaureate Exams. And then we have course data, and that course data is dual enrollment, A through G completion, and career technical education pathway completion. And we have a flyer that we've handed out. That flyer is on our website, and it explains how we use these measures to determine if a student is considered not prepared, prepared, or approaching prepared. I really wanted to stress that it's important to keep in mind that some of the measures in the CCI only apply to a small number of schools. And this is really important, such as the IB program. The IB program is a well-known program that it prepares students very well for college. We don't have a lot of schools in California who have this program, but we wanted to make sure to give those schools credit for providing this program to students. So the whole purpose of the CCI was to be more inclusive. We want to put things in there that are going to help schools, not things that are going to ding schools. So that's why we felt that since it was a really good measure that we had to recognize that and include that measure in the CCI, even though only a small number of schools offer that program. So we do know that there are some current measures that may not be appropriate to evaluate the success and progress of DAS schools, like AP exams. Many DAS schools do not offer AP courses. We also know that we currently have a limited number of career measures. And with DAS schools, career readiness can be a real significant focus. And so we felt that it was really important to focus on getting additional career measures collected through CalPADS. Yes.
I did not do my job this morning and say we shouldn't use acronyms. So could you please tell people who might be listening on the television what DAS is, please? See, I took that role of chair and I sort of blew my job as vice chair. So thank you. No, and I'm sorry too. It's just that all of a sudden I'm going, they may not have even known what CCI was, but when we got to DAS, I didn't think they would. Okay. Thank you.
I apologize. So DAS is the Dashboard Alternative School Status that we refer to as DAS. The schools that qualify for this program either qualify through legislation, they're juvenile court schools, community day schools, county-run schools, or schools that are alternative schools of choice or charter schools that serve, that have 70% of their students enrolled are at high risk. So those are the schools that we're looking at as alternative schools for the DAS program. And I keep referencing the CCI, which is the College Career Indicator. So the College Career Indicator currently only has one reference to career. That's the CTE pathway completion. So as I was saying, that we do have a lot of alternative schools or DAS schools that really do focus on preparing their students for a career. And so we felt that that was really important to try to collect additional data starting in the 18-19 school year. So we currently have, we are currently collecting some measures that that are under consideration for inclusion in the CCI in the 2018 dashboard release. Those up in the first three boxes, the first three that are recently collected, starting with the 2016-17 school year. They're the articulated CTE courses, the State Seal of Biliteracy, and the Golden State Seal diploma. Then we have the bottom three boxes. This data has been collected in CalPADS for several years, and we're going to be looking to see how we can incorporate that in the possibility of incorporating these courses into the College Career Indicator. That's the Leadership Military Science, and then two types of work experience, the general and exploratory, and then the career technical work. So any school can qualify for these, whether they're DAS schools or non-DAS schools. Also important to remember that when we apply, when we're going through to make determinations about DAS schools and whether they're preparing their students for post-secondary, they can, if they meet any of the measures that's currently in there, that's great. Those measures are available to all DAS schools, all alternative schools. We are going to be putting in additional measures that would be specific to those schools. So they could have, as a matter of fact, many DAS schools, a lot of their students do have dual enrollment. In fact, they have more dual enrollment than traditional high schools. That's part of their plan. So that would apply to them. So they would still have access to show, you know, how well they're preparing their students for post-secondary with all the measures that are currently in, plus whatever new measures we add in to the College and Career Indicator. So then we have some career measures that we are planning for collection in the 2018-19 school year, and that's the completion of the pre-apprenticeship, completion of a state or federal job program. That will be limited to DAS schools. These DAS schools are the only ones who have this program. And then we have the Workforce Readiness Certificate, and that is available to both DAS and non-DAS schools. And we're really excited about the next set of courses and work-based learning that we're going to be collecting. This is going to be the first time that we're going to be collecting this type of data in CalPADS. And we're going to be looking at the completion of the workability courses. And of course, this is going to be limited to students who have an IEP. And then we're going to be looking at the completion of the workability work-based learning, also limited to students with an IEP. Now, not all schools may offer workability courses, but we're putting this in there because we know that there are schools that do offer this, and we want to give them credit for it. And then we have the completion of the transition partnership courses. It's my understanding that all schools do offer these types of courses, and so all schools would be included in this. And we have the completion of the transition partnership work-based learning. We felt that it was really important that we not only just look at courses, but also the work-based learning that goes with that, because we feel that in order to be prepared for post-secondary, you need both. So this is just some information that CalPADS will have the courses available for people to start using in CalPADS starting in July. Most schools don't populate that until the first data collection process. And then the program and certificate data, that is not going to be available to upload into CalPADS until May 2018. So these are the pre-apprenticeship, the transition program to work-based learning. It's important to know this because districts are still going to have to adjust their local systems to collect this data, but they won't be able to upload it until May. And so I provided a handout that provides the description of all the courses and the programs, and that's handout 1 in your packets. This is going to be an important handout as when you leave the dais. So for 2019 and 20, we get this question a lot. The question is, are you going to be collecting industry certificates? And yes, we are. It's going to take us a little bit longer to do that, but we are going to collect that. We are in the process of working to figure out the best way to do that. And then we're going to be collecting internships as well. So those things are coming in 2019-20. So we wanted to provide an opportunity for you to have a little breakout session and have some conversation. And so I developed these 3 questions. Of course, if you want to discuss something else, you're free to do so. If there's something that you think is really important that I didn't think about, please feel free to have that discussion. But we really wanted to know, are there additional data, courses or programs that should be collected in 1920? And I'm saying 1920 because 1819 is closed. Can't add anything else into CalPADS, so don't try to ask me to put it in 1819. Can't do that. And we reference slide 19, but it's also in your handout as well. So, and then do you have any suggestions for communicating strategies to ensure that LEAs and schools are aware of the new data collection process? And I think this is really important for the workability and transition programs, since we never collected this type of data before in CalPADS. So you may have some really good advice for us there. And when you look through the handout 1, if you see anything that you think is like, wow, you guys, that's not right, you need to make a correction on your course descriptions, we would really appreciate feedback on that, because we do have some time to make those changes. So with that, I'm going to ask that you go to some groups. And how many groups did you want to break them into? 3?
So I think 2 groups. We have for this item? Okay. I think 2 groups is good. Okay. So we have a couple questions before we move. Thank you. And Jenny, I do appreciate the way that you guys continue to do your presentations, where you provide us information and then you give us the opportunity to grapple with some of the issues and provide our insight. So thank you for that. Kayla, you had a question?
Yes, hi. So I guess it starts on slide 16 and 17 and those items that are identified for career measures planned for collection, so that currently they're not on CalPADS?
That's correct. They are not in CalPADS. We're planning for collection in the 2018-19 school year. So next school year is when the collection will occur.
And so that kind of goes with the handout.
Yes.
And I know that you asked a question already in terms of discussing this as a group, but my question is there a template, or is there, would you be able to provide some sort of a way that local LEAs can collect this information so that it's consistent across, or is that part of the discussions that?
So the handout actually shows what the course descriptions will look like in CalPADS. That's currently what we will have in CalPADS. And then our CalPADS office, our staff, they do work with the CalPADS administrators at districts, and they do work with the vendors so that they can get their local systems, so they can make sure to collect it in their local system so they can load it up to CalPADS. So there's going to be a lot of training this summer with CalPADS administrators, and there's going to be a lot of conversation with the vendors that help districts at the local level. But we've always noticed that sometimes that quite isn't enough just to focus on the CalPADS administrators, and that we should somehow get the word out to various other groups so that everyone's on the same page. And we found that to be very successful when we started trying to encourage our accountability coordinators to actually connect with the CalPADS administrators, because accountability coordinators have a better sense on what it means for accountability, and they can give advice to their CalPADS administrators. So we do have a process in place that will train the CalPADS administrators, but we would like some assistance in how to get the word out to other people that you think it would be appropriate.
And in terms of slide 17, which is specific for students with IEPs, that's also going to be added to CalPET, or is expected to be added to CalPET?
Yes, it's going to be added in the 2018-19 school year.
Okay.
And I don't believe these types of courses have not been collected in CalPETs previously.
No, yeah. they
So
have-
this is going to be really very rich information. I can't tell you how we're going to incorporate it into the college career indicator because I don't have the data yet. So I have to get the data first, and then we can have discussions on how to incorporate it.
Great, thank you, Jenny. Mildred and then Summer.
Yeah, I have a concern in regards to maybe the bigger picture. The schools that are classified as DAS, if they are including your community day school, other alternative schools, the support and infrastructure for those schools has been lacking. So is there I think this is excellent to be able to talk about college career indicators, but just because I know and have worked most recently with a community day school where they were having issues with getting teachers, they were having concerns in regards to having a stable administrator, that they were doing their best to try to come up with just the graduation requirements because of the concern around teachers. We're talking about students who have a high absenteeism rate, behavioral interventions are a concern. So it would just, before we could break into groups, I'd like to, if maybe, Kristen, you know, what the infrastructure, like how is this rolling from down the hill? Because I think the CalPATS people are totally separated from what's happening in the field with these students. So if you only are talking to CalPATS, that's not going to get to the folks with the boots on the ground with this student population. So in order to be able to respond, I just need the context of how this is rolling forward.
So we are developing this statewide system of school support. We don't have any data on DAS schools, but as the data becomes available for DAS schools, we'll be working with our colleagues in the Title I office who are in charge of the support. And we'll also be working with Kristen and our colleagues in the special education division to figure out the best approach for that. Kristen, you might have a little more information on how this might work.
Well, and yes, and we are actually Shiloh and with the special ed division, other special ed division staff, we are working closely with CalPATS and with them also. So it's not just between the data people. There's a larger group involved.
So there's a program component that we don't know anything about?
Well, this is all being built in the air. So your point is well taken, but we have been starting to meet on it. So
Okay.
as soon as we have more information, we will provide that to you.
Great, thank you, Mildred. Summer and then David.
Hi, my question is very different, and it's more of the conceptual realm. So I'm thinking about it with regard to student motivation, especially because the schools will be held accountable, and so student motivation is so key. So I believe I read that students would not be getting a report on themselves individually, but just the school would be getting the data as a whole for the school. Is that correct?
That is correct. The CCI is a school and LEA accountability report. We are not providing individual reports to students. Remember that the CCI is based on the graduating cohort. So we are making, and we did that, we picked the graduating cohort for a specific reason, because a rigorous course of study requires 4 years, right? You're looking at 4 years, and we want to look at the whole high school experience to see how well the students are doing. So the information is based on, did the students who graduate, did they receive a rigorous course of study, and are they prepared for post-secondary? So it's always after the fact. And we felt that it would be really inappropriate to provide it to students.
So I guess I'm just thinking about it a little differently in the longer term lens because of the idea of student motivation, especially as you bring career into it, because I'm thinking if you're going to be building this whole thing, it seems to me there's a world of opportunity to be taking this data for an individual student and looking at college applications, but also looking at apprenticeships and all the different career opportunities. So it seems to me that it would be kind of, well, I'm at least at my first thinking about it, a wasted opportunity if we were going to just not include students to be getting the information for two reasons. One, I think it would provide really interesting pathways for their future as they start to introduce themselves to the world as a candidate for whatever they choose. And two, from the school's point of view, their own motivation. So if they're going to be getting this report and they know that it makes a difference how they did on all these different pathways for the choices that they make as they graduate, then I think it helps the school in holding the students to be engaged in the process as well. So I wouldn't want to discount, maybe not at this moment in time thinking about giving it to students, but it just seems we'd be missing a big opportunity, but I'm just starting to think about it. So that's just my first thoughts.
Thank you.
Can I just clarify? I think the purpose of this, though, is for statewide accountability. And I think you bring up a great point, Summer, about how do we ensure that our students are armed with information that's they can utilize as like a stair stepping to whatever, so they're not losing that. And those are conversations that are happening right now about so especially in terms of from an IEP and transition plan perspective, what vehicle do you have to be able to move through the different parts of the system? But I think partly because we don't offer all programming throughout the state, that comparison at the student level, while it might be helpful to the student to have their information, this is more of holding LEAs accountable and giving them credit for this indicator. So I think it's two a little bit different things and different purposes, but I think we should put a pin in that point that you have, because I do think we do need to empower our students as much as we can with all the information about their history and past. But to a certain extent, that's what the IEP and transition plan really should be doing, and that should be their vehicle. And I think talking about, I don't know if you guys have looked at California Career Zone, if your students have accounts on there should be a combination of sort of that type of thing along with the IEP and transition plan. And I know you guys are in the field, so you can talk more to this, but what is sort of like the general statewide practice to have that vehicle that moves along with the student? That's something that we're still trying to figure out and would love your great thoughts about. But this, I think, is more about accountability.
Yes.
I think if this is just being built, my only point was to leave a window open, because I'm not in secondary, but I just hear from my colleagues all the time that there's very few pathways for students to stay motivated and engaged. And it seems like this is an exciting opportunity to say early on, look, you could take this document and show that you're fully qualified or you're approaching being qualified in various areas. And I think it's an exciting process. And so if we're opening that door through this accountability measure, just to keep some part of it open, to maybe factor that in later, because especially as the schools are being held accountable, it's an avenue for them to sort of touch on that motivation piece,
A good point. David and then Michelle. Yeah. To respond. Yeah, sure.
So I wanted just to highlight, as a person in secondary, that I think with the new approaching prepared requirements, it's going to fuel the conversation that you want schools to have, because I can already feel the heat behind it. Like, how are we going to help our students who are not going to be traditional A to G, with C's or higher and A to G courses? How are we going to help them to meet these other prepared indicators? And that means that CTE pathways and dual enrollment pathways are going to start to take on a lot of weight in conversations that we have with students. So you're going to see that happening anyway. And I think it's already happening in LA Unified. I know linked learning is very widespread, and that is something that they have been working hard to include. And I know they're going to be thrilled that it's going to be collected in CalPADS, the actual work-based learning experiences, and also the industry work certificates. That's been a big push there. So there is a lot of things already in place systematically in other districts as well. Long Beach, Pasadena, I know they all have those things going on, where I think in combination by including that now and measuring it It's just going to push people who maybe have been sitting back a little bit to move it forward. So I'm just giving you that encouragement there.
Nice. Thank you, Michelle. Yes, Kristen, and then David, thank you for your
The other thing to
patience.
point out is that everything that we're holding the general system responsible for is also what we're holding them responsible for students with disabilities. So we're part of the main system. This isn't like a special ed system. This is in addition to all the other things that we're holding each and every student and district and school accountable for. This is in addition to give extra credit, right?
Correct.
Thanks for clarifying.
Thank you, Jenny. And so my question stems from slide 8, and I believe we had this conversation at the last meeting around the one-year graduation rate. And so the definition of when David becomes a senior will be based on age or credits. How will that determine when the 1 year starts?
So that's a really good question because there's going to have to be a change of mindset at the local level. We're not telling people how to place their students, but we are looking at students who are in grade 12. So if you are placing your students in grade 12 based on age and they have no chance of graduating at the end of that school year, they're going to be counted as a non-graduate. So if I was at a DAS school or alternative school, I would want to be placing my students in grades based on credit.
And my second question, will the data or tracking allow us to be able to determine that alternative school A, the majority of their kids are receiving certificates of completion or taking the GED, so that there's a level of accountability in terms of that there is a rigorous instructional program, and it's not simply, David, you're 21, here's your certificate of completion.
Right. So we will probably have to develop some other reports. We've done that with the CCI to provide that information. So we will probably have to do that with this so that schools can see, alternative schools can see how many students graduate with a regular diploma, a GED. And we do know that there are some schools where the student graduates with a or earns their GED, but they stay on to get their regular diploma. So we want to make sure to show that. There's going to be some schools where some special education schools are serving students who are only going to get a certificate of completion. But you'll be able to see that also. And we want to monitor that to make sure that we don't have districts who decide to move students to various schools. And I think it's important with the completion of the workability courses, since it applies to all students with an IEP, that means if a student is in a traditional school, they can still meet these criteria. So I think that's really important. It sends an incentive to our schools to keep their students on campus at a regular high school, if at all possible.
Okay, I love this slide that you have up. It is going to make such a huge difference. I appreciate everything that your group has done to add this into the career pathways, because I know I have students who had done completion of transition partnership and nobody ever knew it and nobody ever cared and it wasn't anywhere and now it is. And I agree. I think this is we're reinventing a wheel. We've never done it before. We don't know how to do it. I agree with what Mildred said. We have to make sure that it's out there for everybody. And I believe, Summer, that this is going to cause conversations. I think this is a good first step. For all the years that we've been sitting here and none of this have ever been discussed, this is a really good step towards what we've all been looking for, that everybody isn't going to graduate with the same type of diploma, but they can be successful in the world.
Thank you for that, Barbara.
Yeah.
So in the interest of time, I'm going to make a recommendation that we not split into small groups for discussion. And it does seem like, if folks, if you could switch to, or Jenny, if you could switch back to your breakout question slide, it does seem like maybe we've touched on a few of these items in our discussion, but wanted to put it out there to the group very generally as you look at these discussion questions. Let Jenny know, do you have any additional comments or thoughts or feedback that we could provide as they're putting this together? So again, is there any additional data they should be collecting as they think about 1920? Any suggestions for communications, making sure that folks are aware of the new data collection, and any necessary changes?
Gina?
Yes,
I was
Matt,
just going to
thank
say,
you.
since we're short on time, people could email me anything they might want, and I can get it to Jenny.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, and it would be great if, especially with the data that you think we should collect in 1920, have conversations back at your LEAs or with your colleagues to ask them if they have any ideas. We have a little bit of time there. We don't have to have that ready until next March. So have some conversations and then get back to us.
Fantastic. Let's see, Kimberly, and then, so don't go away, Jenny. I think we're open, we're opening it up for folks to have discussion now. If
Well, it's really on the second bullet. Me? Yes, I'm up. Okay. I'll lean forward. Sorry. I'll lean forward. Before I made a suggestion, I'd want to know, do you have ideas about how to roll out that information to our LEAs and schools? I do see this as very useful information, but I know that we will be getting it at the end of a year, and so it doesn't necessarily map down to a site and to a student level. I really think that's going to be the LEA's responsibility to really look at our local indicators paired with our dashboard and making sure that we have embedded this information and that we're tracking it ourselves and that we know as a single site where we are and what work we have to do with the students that attend there. But what are your ideas about how this will be rolled out and how school districts will be informed?
So traditionally, we work, we have a system in place, a process in place to work with CalPADS administrators, accountability coordinators, and dashboard coordinators. We send them letters. We'll probably do some webinars and some trainings. So my question is, are there other groups that we should be including? I mean, I'm going to be honest, I'm just not as familiar with the special ed world as you may be. So if there's specific groups that you think that we should make sure that we send communications to so they can participate in any of webinars that we do, that would be very helpful.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Kimberly. Mildred?
Well, there are in each LEA. There's I think you have to deal with the program side of the house, and alternative ed can sometimes get left behind. So if you're looking at your alternative ed system, particularly where you have community day school, I do know that CDE, Dan, has an ongoing newsletter that goes out to all the community day school and alternative education administrators. And it's kind of a update about laws and concerns that only deal with that, that population. And I know that many alternative ed administrators look to that as far as what's coming out from CDE. So I think that communication still goes out. I think that as far as there are actually state organizations like CASWA that work specifically with alternative ed and working to support students who have attendance issues and needs. So that would certainly, they have a conference coming up. I mean, if this is something coming down the pike, there's a way to be able to start those conversations, and pretty much every region has a CASWA contact. And then in terms of all the programmatic meetings that are going on in districts now because of differentiated assistance, there has to be some targeted conversation with administrators who are supporting students in alternative settings. And then in most districts, there is a liaison between special education and all those alternative sites, because many of those students have Section 504 plans or IEPs, and so there is a special ed administrator. So I think that through the SELPA organization to say that this is heads up, that this is coming out for alternative ed, that would be another vehicle. But I just have to say that this is a population that has pretty much gone underserved. The administrator I spoke with a couple days ago when we were talking about graduation rates, she's had 2 students in 4 years get a diploma. So it's not one where students are motivated. These are quote unquote those throwaway kids. And so somehow it has to be from a programmatic side as well as certainly collecting the data. But I think you'd be very disappointed in the data if you looked at it today.
Thank you, Mildred. I appreciate that. Other folks? Okay, why don't we take public comment? Any public comment on this item, Matt? Great, thank you. All right, thank you, Jenny, for being here. Okay, commissioners, we're moving on to item number 2. This is our ledge update and small group discussion. So we will be breaking into 2 groups for this item, but I would like to invite Sue Vang from the Government Affairs Division to come to the podium. And Sue's going to give us an overview of 2 particular bills, and these are bills that that we discussed briefly, or they were raised at the last meeting and asked for some further discussion, and appreciate folks sharing their opinions. Put it on the agenda for the opportunity for us to just weigh in our function as an advisory body. So thank you and welcome.
Welcome. Hello. Good morning. My name is Sue Vang. I'm the legislative representative in Government Affairs Division here at the Department of Education. I was asked to provide a legislative update on 2 bills, AB 2704 by Assemblymember O'Donnell and AB 1951 by Assemblymember O'Donnell as well. So, figure this out. Okay. So currently, AB 2704 is in the Assembly Appropriations Committee. It passed out of Assembly Education Committee last Wednesday with bipartisan support. This bill establishes new family empowerment centers with priority given to underserved or high-need regions beginning January 1, 2019. The bill does not define what high needs and underserved regions are. It does require the superintendent to determine that. And to determine the manner in which to give priority to new centers. This would be done by February 15, 2020. The bill would also require grants to be awarded in the 1920 fiscal years, which here, as you see, is going to be $223,000. The allocation will be determined based on school enrollment of the region and will also include an annual cost of living adjustment beginning in the 2021 fiscal year. It also requires that the department develop a template to gather specified data elements that are outlined in Section 6 of the bill, which I believe you all have a copy of. FECs would be required to submit that data to the department on an annual basis. Any questions so far? Okay. The bill requires that an FEC has to provide training and information to parents. This is a current requirement of FECs, and so the bill maintains that requirement. The bill does require that FECs would have to attend IEP development meetings if there is available resources and if a parent has requested that. And again, as I mentioned, FECs would be required to submit the data annually to the department that based on the template that the department develops. And the bill also requires that FECs conduct an annual independent evaluation of the effectiveness of their services. Some legislative background on this bill. FECs were established in 2001 to help families of children with disabilities navigate special education system. A recent report for the 16-17 fiscal year shows that FECs serve families with, children with a variety of disabilities, children with on the autism spectrum disorder has the highest disability in terms of the types of families that are being served, followed by speech or language impairment and intellectual disability. In 2011, the legislature did establish 32 centers through SB 511. However, the last center was, however, there are currently 14 centers statewide. And so the legislature has, or the state has not developed any new centers. And so this bill would seek to increase and establish new centers. And I have here a table that provides you the counties which there are no FECs located. So some questions for you to consider when you break into your small group discussions is whether, should priority for funding go towards establishing an FEC in regions that currently do not have an FEC? Would regions that already have an FEC be eligible to apply for a grant to establish a new one? And how should high need and underserved be defined? Some things for you to consider in your small group discussions.
Thank you, Sue. Any questions before she moves on to the next bill? Barbara?
I think that this came up from the Special Education Task Force. They were, when they started talking about this, they wanted to make sure that if FECs were being open, new ones or whatever, that there would be accountability. That was very important to them, and I see that in more than one place, so thank you.
Great, thank you, Barbara. Leanne, did you have a question?
Hi, Sue. I'm just looking over the number 223,000. I'm kind of curious, how did they end up coming up with that number?
I don't personally know that. That's something I can look into and provide that feedback to you.
Okay.
Great, thank you, Leanne. Michelle, you have a question? Thank you.
Hi, good morning. Of the families served, do you have data on breakdown on socioeconomic status and or ethnicity? And also, do you have breakdown by neighborhood, like residency? I think that would help empower the conversation on what is need. Thanks.
Great. I don't have that information with me, but we can certainly provide that with what we have. Okay.
And can I just clarify one point, Sue? So in your last slide, was it the intention that an FEC could expand their existing group, or could they open a second one? Or is this intended to open new FECs in other regions? Is there a preference in the language that I missed?
Not that I'm aware of, there is no preference. I think that it does state that the superintendent shall determine the manner in which to determine that priority. And so which is why I think having your input on what that manner would be important for this
Great,
legislation.
thank you. Yes, Havania.
I have a question about the current slide and the shading. So the darker shade are counties that currently don't have FECs?
No, these are all counties that currently do not have.
So the dark and the light
Yes.
don't have FECs in the county.
That's helpful, thank you.
That was weird to me.
Thanks for clarifying. Yeah. Great, thanks, Sue.
Before I begin my presentation on AB 1951, also by Assemblymember O'Donnell, I do want to note that I do have here with me Carrick Ashley, Deputy Director, as well as Michelle Center, our Director of our Assessment Division, in the event that there are questions beyond my expertise in assessments. So AB 1951 is also in Assembly Appropriations Committee. It got out of Assembly Education Committee last week as well with bipartisan support. The bill would require the superintendent to approve a nationally recognized high school assessment, such as SAT or ACT. It would authorize an LEA to administer the assessment that is approved by the superintendent in lieu of our state assessment, which, as you all know, is Smarter Balance assessments in grade 11 for English language arts and mathematics. And districts would be able to do this beginning in the 1920 school year. The bill, while it does require that the superintendent approve a nationally recognized high school assessment based on federal requirements. It does allow it to bypass that approval process that the superintendent would have to do by authorizing LEAs to use a nationally recognized high school assessment if it's been approved by another state who also has adopted Common Core state standards. So if a state got it approved and another state got it approved, districts would be able to start using that assessment irrespective of where the superintendent may be in the process of approving a national high school assessment. AB 1951 requires LEAs to, if they choose to administer a nationally recognized assessment, to notify the superintendent and parents that they will be administering that assessment at the beginning of the school year. They would have to administer the test free of charge to all students unless they opt out. They would have to provide the assessment to students with exceptional needs with appropriate accommodations. It also requires that they provide an alternate assessment to students with exceptional needs who are unable to participate in the test. They are also required to administer to English learners with the appropriate accommodations, and they would have to report the scores and the participation data to the Department of Education. Federal law does allow states to use nationally recognized high school assessments. However, federal law has specific criteria and process in which a state has to go through in order to use a nationally recognized high school assessment. I've outlined here 3 key requirements that a national high school assessment would have to meet. So they would have to it would have to be aligned to state standards. It would also have to be comparable and provide valid and reliable measurement across the entire spectrum of performance of the students that will be tested, both the low and the high end. It would also have to be compatible, which means that they must have adequate training, directions, and monitoring and data of the nature that is similar to what is provided on the statewide assessment here in California. Some legislative background for you to consider. So this legislation sort of is connected to Long Beach Unified School District to the extent that Long Beach did submit a waiver to use SAT in place of Smarter Balance assessments for ELA and mathematics in grade 11. The state board response to the waiver request was essentially, it was not considered because section code 60640 is non-waivable. The Assemblymember O'Donnell then introduced a bill last year, AB 1602, that was held in Assembly Appropriations Committee. That bill would have established a pilot program for 5 districts to be able to administer a nationally recognized high school assessment. Long Beach then submitted another waiver request, which received a similar response from the state board. And here we have now AB 1951, which has been introduced in this session, and it is currently, as I mentioned, in Assembly Appropriations Committee. AB 1951 is a statewide bill, so it would not be a pilot, which the original bill was. When the board responded to the Long Beach's waiver request, they did include in their letter concerns regarding Long Beach's waiver on using SAT in lieu of the Smarter Balance assessments. And so the 5 key concerns was that SAT has not received an independent evaluation documenting a satisfactory alignment to California standards, that SAT does not have a documentation that it measures the full range of achievement for every student, that SAT does not afford students the same set of supports and accommodations provided by state assessments here in California, that SAT does not report results on the same scale, nor has there been an equivalency study And then the letter also raised concerns about its impact on funding to Long Beach Unified School District. So similar to AB 2704, laid out some questions for you to consider as you deliberating your small group discussions on the impact of AB 1951. So how does the bill ensure the role of an IEP in determining the best supports for students with disabilities? What protections are provided to students who require supports and accommodations that SAT or ACT does not offer? How would this impact California's accountability system to have multiple measures measuring different standards? And how would students be impacted by the lack of continuity from elementary to secondary grades in terms of what is being taught and measured? Okay, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Sue. I do have a question. Oh, I have some questions. Great. Kayla, Michelle, and then Summer.
Just a clarifying question in terms of this bill. So this bill is limiting specifically to SAT or ACT as another option?
It refers specifically to a nationally recognized assessment. And so my understanding is that the SAT and ACT are nationally recognized assessments. And so we use it as an example, but it wouldn't be limited to just those two.
Okay.
Go ahead, Michelle.
So I'm just curious if you might be able to provide the rationale for the need for this at all. I'm just kind of confused. Why do we need to do that?
It's my understanding that the author's fact sheet was provided to each member, and what the sponsors and the author's office have shared is that students see SATs and ACTs as a valuable assessment to the extent that it's used for college admissions purposes, and so students are more invested in that assessment. That districts want to encourage students to attend college, so this is one means of helping students by offering SAT or ACT to the students free of charge during the school day. For some students, there may be challenges to take the SAT on the weekends. And so districts that are offering SATs, their desire is to reduce testing time.
Right. Well, for a whole bunch of students who are not committed to a four-year school, the SAT is not motivating. So that's my first thing. But the second thing is that when you score a certain level on the SBAC test, whether it's English or math section, you are marked college ready or not college ready, and that allows you in some schools to bypass the prerequisite to do like remedial math and those kind of things and go straight into your English 101. So there's motivation for everybody in that. So I'm just questioning it because there's a lot of issues with an SAT does not measure what we teach in school. Anybody who's taken one knows that's true.
So thank you, Michelle. And Sue, I know that you are in a position of coming and informing us on the bills. So thank you. Thank you. No, you don't have to apologize, Michelle, at all. Just thank you for your flexibility. Summer, and then some of this discussion we will encourage to have in our groups too. But Summer, please go ahead.
I just had a clarifying question. Since they're calling out SAT and ACT, which are time tests, I find it hard to imagine that they're going to provide an accommodation of an untimed test. Do you have any background on that?
What I have been provided and which was handed out is a crosswalk that Long Beach Unified School District has given us, which provides you that breakdown between smart balanced accommodations and SATs. However, I know that there are some clarifications even based off of that document, which Michelle will provide.
Good morning.
Welcome, Michelle.
Michelle Center, the assessment director. So that's a great question. And the handout that you just received, I also just received this morning. So I haven't had time to go through and ensure. I did notice some things on it automatically. One of them pertaining to the headers. And so you might want to take a look at the handout that was provided to you in terms of the similarities of accessibility supports and the categories that we have those supports in. And so something that is labeled an accommodation on on SAT that is allowable for students with disabilities may actually be something that we offer to all students, regardless of the need of an IEP. So that's something that is interesting. In terms of timing, it's a little more difficult to find information on these proprietary assessments. But we have done a couple things. We've talked to another state who is implementing this, and according to that conversation, they are not allowing untimed. They're allowing 100% extra time. That being said, there was also the statement that, but yet they give them everything in the IEP. So my answer to you is, it is still unclear. And I think that's part of the concern that we are expressing in terms of accessibility supports. It is unclear, and it's unclear about what documentation you would need to gain access to those supports.
Does that help?
For those that aren't working, the number of 504 requests as students are approaching SATs and ACTs are through the roof. And it's all about the issue of timed and untimed. So that's why it's when they state that they would provide accommodations for those people, I think a request for assessments would just be extreme if we had this in as a national exit exam kind of a thing.
Thank you, Michelle. Just as a clarifying point, I know that this commission and you and Carrick and your divisions have spent a significant amount of time on our accountability and our assessment work for the past many years. And we are at a place where we are now looking at accountability for all students. And eventually, ideally, we'd get to a place where we could follow the funding and target funding for specific populations based on what their needs were. And that's, I know, down the road, but we're working towards something specific. That is all based on being able to identify what the outcomes of students and the performance of students looks like. If students from different districts are opting into different tests, what information would we have at the state level in order to determine how we should be funding kids with disabilities or the broader system in general?
I think that's a very good question. We have developed a very cohesive system right now. The cohesion is what is being taught in our classroom by way of our standards and by way of instructional supports that we are providing to our educators aligned to those standards, our assessment system, and our accountability system. That's what we have built, and that is what we have spent many years building right now. In terms of comparison, we know that the bill requires us to be able to equate and compare those results as if it didn't matter which tests they took. Okay. That being said, we also have a letter from one of our members of our technical design group that is from Stanford, who has grave concerns about the ability to make that equivalency. I think his quote was, "It just can't be done," in his letter of opposition to the bill. And so we do share those concerns. We share the concerns from different perspectives. One is the comparability of schools and districts that are using different tests. But the other concern we have is being able to longitudinally compare a site that may have changed its assessments from year to year or maybe only once, and how that may impact that longitudinal comparison. So we have basically two different concerns in that area.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So commissioners, sorry, Sarah, go right ahead.
Mine isn't about these, can you hear me? About these two bills specifically, but it's a little bit of a broader question before we break up into small groups, and that's the discussion of AB 3136, the other O'Donnell bill. And this is an advisory group that should be discussing that bill. It's a special ed funding bill. And it's talking about giving funding for preschool, leveling up our AB 602 funding, and looking at low incidence funding. And I guess I'm just really concerned that this body is not discussing that bill today, because that has a greater impact on us than the family empowerment centers. or than this bill. Not that these aren't important, but I think we need to be looking, and I don't know if you have any information on 3136, but we also have, David's been extremely involved in 3136. I know we have people from State SELPA here who can speak to it, but I think any discussion we have about legislation and moving forward, that has to be part of our discussion.
Thanks, Sarah.
So that brings a bigger question just about in terms of how you want to define your role as a commission, because there has been over time a committee on legislation, but over the past 5 years, there hasn't really been anyone willing to take over that charge. So to the defense of your leadership, there has to be a group of people who are willing to sort through the hundreds and hundreds of education bills that you're interested in. And so if you have a specific bill you're interested in, there's nothing precluding you from personally doing research on that bill and bringing that information forward to the body. So I implore or really ask all of you to, if this is something that you're really interested in, to make that a priority, and someone needs to take the torch and run with it. But it puts the department in a position where we're trying to meet your needs, and your leadership's trying to meet your needs, but your needs have to also be defined by the work that you want to do as a body. We're here to facilitate you and are not making decisions on your behalf. We're just trying to bring what current information that we have to you but feel free at any time to bring that forward, to make those requests. And if there's someone who has that background and wants to focus on legislation, I can tell you historically, there have been people who've been really interested in it and have spent a lot of time on it. So in the past, what it looked like was perhaps the night before the meeting. I know when I used to be on it, we used to spend 4 or 5 hours going through bills the night before, bringing them forward. It's a big time commitment and process. Every person would take 20 or 30 bills, and then we would go home and research them and get the main points and put them in bullets and then bring them to the committee. And then the problem is for you guys, and that's why this is a discussion item, is you can't just bring in bills and then the commission's making an oppose or support position without having process for the dialogue, because you need to let your public know that you're going to be bringing something up. So this is really to just bring some legislation to your attention. But if you have anything else that you're interested in, that's fine. That does bring up a point about today, too, and I just want to mention the purpose of your legislative visits today are not to go over and lobby for bills. The purpose of your visit is to let them know that you exist and that you're here to assist them. So when they have bills that come up, they know to come and ask you so that you can agendize those starting in your leg committee and work it through the process. But it is a big time commitment, so you have to decide if that's something that you want to do as a body or not.
Great. Thank you, Kristen. Barbara.
Quick question going back to 2704. I'm sorry, Kirk, just give me 1 second. Is there a reason FECs don't do birth to 3? Is it just because that's the way it was?
I believe so.
Oh, okay. Okay, the resource center.
They're funded differently, so the family
Thank
resource
you.
centers.
Okay, all of a sudden that was it. And Michelle, do you realize how calmly I'm sitting here after all of the years of all of this? I really want to cry because I can't believe that we finally all came to a consensus, and now this could all be thrown out the window. And one school district can give the ACT, and one can give the SAT, and one can give something else that's something else. That to me is so scary as a person who lives in California. So all those years I fought with you, Michelle, I want you to know this is even scarier.
Hi, Carrick.
Good morning.
Welcome.
Carrick Ashley, Deputy Superintendent, Performance Planning and Technology Branch. Just wanted to clarify a couple of points. Thank you for your comments. Is this not loud enough?
I don't think so.
Am I not close enough?
There you are.
Okay. So just wanted to clarify a couple of things. One, we know the author, Patrick O'Donnell, 1951, would not knowingly present a bill that would disadvantage certain students. But you have to understand that unless you administer these tests, unless you're the contract monitor for these tests, you understand what a test vendor has told you that their test will do. And we've worked with a lot of test vendors over the years. And so we've heard a lot of claims. Yes, we're aligned to standards. Yes, we provide accommodations for all students. Yes, we do this. Yes, we do that. And again, unless you're the monitor, the contract monitor, or you're actually administering these tests yourself, you kind of trust what they say. So the difference between, and this is not about denigrating SAT or ACT, this is about, with Smarter Balance, which is a nationally recognized high school test, it is us. It's the states. The states are directing the work of Smarter Balance. We know what the accommodations are made for students that are in this test. We see it firsthand of what's available to them, and so we can speak on that. So it's important that we listen to independent, outside, third-party folks as to what they say about these tests. Kristen Wright and Scott Kerby have both done a great job educating the rest of us at CDE about the communication that we use. And we've kind of moved away from we're doing things for all students to we are doing things for each student, each and every student. And so even if there is a small number, whatever that number may be, even if there's a small number of students that are disadvantaged by taking a test because they don't have all of the same accommodations that they currently have under Smarter Balance, it's not fair. So I just wanted to lay out that. I know you're not an English learner advisory group, but I would say the same thing about the translations that are provided in Smarter Balance compared to what's given for ACT and SAT, also a fairness issue. So again, thank you.
Great, thank you for coming to the podium. Okay. What? Summer, yes.
Just two things. I want to confirm what Kristen said. I know years ago when I was chair of the subcommittee of the legislation, we had that same conversation. So maybe just a suggestion might be, as the chair's in the process of agenda building, maybe an email could go out that if any of us have heard of any legislation, that might be a good way to get that input. I know when I used to send those out to my contacts in ACSE and different places, I just wouldn't get any responses. So it was difficult for me to, and then we would rely on what the department gave us to look at. So maybe that might be one way to bridge that. If anybody's heard of anything that they want to discuss, we could put it on that way. And then just to Michelle, are you still here? I thought, when I was reading certain things last night, I thought, years ago we were all, I don't know what this thing is, this SBAC thing, and now it's like, don't take that thing away from me. So it's so funny we've come so far. Just to reiterate what Barbara said, I was thinking about you, Michelle. Anyway, that's it.
Very nice. Thank you, Summer. Yes. So I'm going to move us along, and I do appreciate the comments about other legislation that is out there, and I know that Mildred, you and the Mental Health Subcommittee, you guys had a very significant list of bills that you asked for support on, which is fine, but again, we are responsible for that legwork, and Matt does a great job because of his background in helping us, but would love the help, and if folks are interested. And again, we all have bills that we are working outside in our day jobs, and informing conversations. The difference here is that we are advising the appointing bodies, and it is a privileged position to be able to hold that rather than take a position that, in my mind, reduces our input to a support or oppose and does not allow us to actually inform discussions the way that we are intended to do. So with that, as we go into these two breakout groups, I ask that we are efficient and we exercise brevity, but at the same time, it's our responsibility to make sure that the appointing bodies are aware of our thoughts on these questions, and you help. These are great discussion questions that you have proposed to us, Sue. So the charge is not to go into a group and decide if we support or oppose either bill. The charge is to go into the group and have a discussion about what are some of the areas that the the decision makers should be keeping in mind as they're making the decisions and weighing in all the input from the various stakeholders. So we are a inquisitive, inquiring, curious group today, which is great, but we do not have a ton of time left for our groups. So what I would love to do, let's see, let's converse with our vice chair for a moment. So I think that we will go ahead and do our two groups, and then we will adjust our talking point instructional period. So why don't we have you choose which bill you feel more inclined to discussing? Matt, you have a thought? We probably do not have time for that, even though that would have been a good way to do it. We can do that. It just means we have less depth.
And how long does he need to talk?
I was thinking we should go until noon on this item, and then, the talking points take as long as the talking points take, and then we go to lunch and meet at the Capitol.
That's great.
So, and just so everyone knows as well, there's a new lunch spot in the basement of the Capitol that has really good sandwiches and food. So that might be a good transition point for you guys to walk over that direction and already be over there, so you're not stuck in between.
Thank you for that, Kristen. They have great sandwiches. So let's see. So with that extended time, maybe both groups, we leave it open for the groups to discuss both bills, and focusing on these questions with a few key messages to bring back to us as a full group. Okay, so let's have half the group.
We also have 1103.
Yes, half of them there.
So one group in there, and then one group back here.
Yeah, so one group here, and is 1103 the media room?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, great. So if we do half of the group here, I'll let you make sure that we split evenly, and half in the media room, and we'll meet you back here at 12 o'clock. Great. Welcome back, commissioners. This is an exciting day. Matt, again, just want to thank you for your time, your level of organization. Before we break to head over to the Capitol, and I thought it was a great suggestion to grab food in the cafeteria. It has been remodeled recently. I highly recommend the oatmeal raisin cookies. Sorry, yes.
And where do we walk?
Yes, so I just want to reiterate before we get into the content, again, this is not a lobbying day. However, the topic of special education has permeated many conversations. It is very likely that the topic of special ed will come up in conversations because folks are really interested in funding, in MTSS, in inclusion, in assessment, in accountability. Feel comfortable sharing the discussions that we have had here. But again, we all wear different hats during the day. We all have a little of a different take on some bills. So I do think that it neutralizes our ability to influence where we need to be influencing when we minimize our input to a support or oppose. And so you are experts, you are on the ground, you are in the field, you have the level of expertise that folks need as they're making decisions. So please feel comfortable talking through, answering questions, sharing your insight into the issues as they come up. So Matt has put together some talking points that will hopefully prepare you in the event you get some questions that we tried to anticipate. So Matt, yes, Kristen, and then Matt.
So just in terms of from a statutory perspective and for your role as you're going over there, anything that you say on behalf of the commission needs to be something that the commission has formally voted and agreed on. And since I know everyone has lots of different perspectives, like weighing in on individual bills, like we talked about before, would be your own opinion personally. And you need to really make that clear, because that's not necessarily the purpose of this visit. However, you're all meeting with your individual representatives, and as individuals, or some variation of that, again, you always have the right to represent yourself as an individual, but in terms of from a group perspective, the talking points that were created were some that were created as from work that you guys have already previously done and agreed on. And the main purpose of this is there's a lot of members who don't know you exist and who are hearing a lot of bills about special ed and hearing a lot of terminology. And so for you to be able to go and enlighten them and put a face and a story and your personal perspective to the system is great. So I just wanted to point that out because, again, you're just going on behalf as an individual if you're speaking on very specific things that the commission has not already voted on. But the talking points were created with the group in mind, that you can say as a group, these are things that you've been working towards.
Kristen, do you want to mention the 4 and 5 that are blank on there? Or
so one of the things that that if you don't see something on there that you think is important, for instance, if Barbara wants to highlight more things about transition from her own experience, or if a legislator has a question, those are really spaces for you to have, if there's something that you want to cover that haven't been covered in just the main overall talking points. And you'll notice that we provided, that they're hearing a lot across the street about multi-tiered system of support, about serving a one coherent system. The task force recommendations are still being discussed and all those things. You'll see the MTSS SUMS initiative placemat in there. That's a really good description. So someone's like MTSS, or you're talking to a staff member, that's a really good way to get grounded in that. I think the other really powerful piece is the Pac-Man charts that show the overlap of students with disabilities with other subgroups. That's always a real eye catcher to policymakers, because they'll see that it's not just students with disabilities. It's not like a separate thing. These are students that are many other things. And then, of course, your, as Matt will mention, your advisory commission annual report, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep, go ahead.
Matt, are we leaving these with who we're speaking with, or are we carrying them with them from one to the other?
Question.
So there's 2 copies of each item in there. So yes, the plan, and 2 copies of my card. So the plan is to leave whatever you want to leave. If there's, you would probably want to leave all of 1 copy of each thing, right? So there are going to be groups of you. So there are going to be groups of you going to each meeting, almost certainly. There aren't a lot of one-on-ones just because of the way it worked out. And so whomever is a constituent of that person can give them the information. I will also inform everyone of the rooms that their actual legislators reside in, so that if you want to stop by and give them the information while you're running around, you can do that. So yes, hopefully you'll be leaving the stuff.
Great.
There were 2 copies, and I wanted to make sure everybody understood that, and you hadn't said that yet.
So all those can be handed out. And to Matt's point, if your member if you weren't able to get a meeting, and there are, as you'll notice, a lot of committee meetings going on. So it's not that I'm sure your members don't want to meet with you. I'm sure they do, but they're all in double booked in hearings today. So if you have the opportunity to stop by, if you don't have a meeting with your assembly member or senator, you could still stop by and say, I'm a constituent, and give them your name, and that you stopped by and you'd like to leave some information for them.
And I have the list of all of your legislators, so we'll have that at the Capitol.
You can leave your own personal business card, but you guys don't have advisory commission cards yet, I don't think, do you?
No, none of us do.
Havania does. So you are able, if you would like, you are able to order business cards that have your name as Advisory Commission Commissioner to use for your Advisory Commission business. So you can see Matt about that after.
Yeah. So there's a way they do it here for people, which is submitting the form online. And so it's a little different, obviously, for you guys. So it's an actual write out the form kind of thing. Well, we can talk about it afterwards. Do you want me to go through this?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay.
Thanks, Matt.
So on the right side, you have 2 copies of your talking points. As we talked about, we put the kind of duties that are written out in both federal law and then in California law. The second part kind of is just a mention of who you are on the commission as far as what role you play so that they can understand the makeup and what you bring to the table as far as the commission is concerned. And then Kristen talked about the 3 to 5 talking points that are on the back of these sheets. Secondly, we have the Advisory Commission on Special Education landing page from the website. It says page 1 of 3, but it's not. It's 1 of 2, so front and back. And this kind of talks a little bit more, goes into a little more detail about the function of ACSE. So from there,
You may get some questions about that, so just so that you're armed with the statutory information. And just know this is a guide, so no one's trying to script anyone, but just so that you feel like you have some things to bring up, and then I'm sure the members will have questions or the staff will have questions.
And this will educate them, hopefully, moving forward. Like Kristen mentioned, the pie charts, 2 copies of those. And then we have the MTSS Sums Initiative 2-pager. In the back is 2 copies of the 2016-2017 Advisory Commission on Special Education report, annual report. So we leave those with them. And then on the left-hand side is 2 copies of one of our recent The Edge issues that talks a lot about transition and has some good articles that we thought would kind of be of interest to legislators and their staff. Kristen, do you want to say anything else about that?
Just since we've been talking so much about mapping to employment and transition and WIOA and supported employment, that it has a lot of information on that because that has been coming up a lot lately.
And again, she said, I will meet you all at the Rotunda at 1:30. Actually, I would say 1:25 because we need to meet with Tanya at 1:30 in room 115. But I have a pretty good understanding, as does Kristen, about the makeup of the Capitol. It's a little confusing. And so when we get over there, we can talk about the different rooms. I have my red book, so we're ready.
Yeah, all you need is your badge. We will finish the day over there. We will not come back here at the end of the day today. Take everything that you...
Leave your papers for tomorrow.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
All right, so with that, let's go ahead and pack up. We can head over if you want to head over as a group. We'll head downstairs to the, I don't want to say the word cafeteria, but I guess that's what it is.
It's the State House.
State House, the State House.
Oh, wouldn't it be cool if we could take a picture of all this?
Yeah, that would be great. All right, so Barbara is going to help us get to one spot for a picture.
Because Barbara's into pictures.
All right, we'll see everyone over there and at 1:25 at the latest in the rotunda.